Hello and welcome back to the Bobby and Beardy Show. I'm Bobby, that gentleman over there is McBeardy, and today we're going to discuss Civil War. That's right, we're going to learn all about Oliver Cromwell, the Royalists, the Parliamentarians, the Cavaliers, the Roundheads, and their brief falling out between 1642 and 1651. There are time codes, but obviously we're not talking about that, we're talking about the film that came out. There are time codes below if you want to skip to spoilers, if that's your thing, or avoid those entirely. The choice is yours, and also stay tuned because Beardy is doing the outro this week and I'm expecting big things. Beardy, hello, welcome. How the devil are you, sir?
Well, if you can't tell by the cough and the voice, I may be a little under the weather. I've been away from home with work for the last couple of days, which has been very, very fun, showing our fancy new products. It also led to a lot of drinking and a lot of eating, and that's maybe not gone well for me. So oh, there's a cat!
We've got a cat, an early cat interruption on the podcast. Well, this is Dalton. We're not going to stop recording.
We carry on.
We
the
continue
show must go on.
So you tell me how you're doing, and I'm going to throw him out of the room. Okay, and you say hello to the camera, Dalton.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's been a good weekend, but tired. Voice is gone. I'm unwell. And hungover a little bit most of the weekend. But other than that, great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Not too bad. What an introduction. Spotify listeners won't have seen my gorgeous baby boy, Dalton, make a brief appearance. So, you know, if you're listening on Spotify, come on over to the YouTubes. And if you're on YouTubes, head on over to the Spotify as well. Just some brief plugs there. Yeah, not too bad. I had a very busy weekend doing DIY and things. We're getting to the end of the DIY project. We're just waiting for the carpet to be fitted, and then the living room's done, and then we just need the bathroom done, but I'm not doing that myself, so that's fine.
Good.
Yeah, we saw Civil War yesterday after work, and we're going to talk about that, well, right about now. Would you like the rundown?
Yes, please.
Civil War is written and directed by Alex Garland, who directed 28 Days Later and Dread, amongst many other films. It's a story of a near-dystopian future in which a civil war has broken out between the United States government and various regional factions. The cast include Kirsten Dunst, Wagner Moura, Kaylee Spaney, Stephen McKinley Henderson, Sonia Mizun. Oh my God, why don't I read these before I start reading them out? Nick Offerman and Jesse Plemons. I don't know why I gave myself the job in this podcast as the guy who reads names, because I can't read names.
Well, I can't read, so you got me.
Brilliant. What a pair. The film was released on the 12th of April 2024 for a budget of $50 million, and it's made so far $50 million in the box office. So it's broken even, but we'll need more monies to be a big profitable boy. Beardy. Can you enlighten us a little bit more on the old story, though?
As you mentioned, it's obviously a sort of like near dystopian future. It's a civil war set in modern day America, where a couple of states have sort of seceded and working together. Interestingly, it's California and Texas. Don't usually agree, which is a big part of the plot, which is quite nice. And it's this sort of Western Front working against this dictatorship, whatever. Rest of the US with a president who is locked away in the White House, secured by the FBI. You hear news rants all over the radio, which, by the way, Nick Offerman, I wish I'd seen more of him in this. He may or may not be a slight celebrity crush. I'm not even going to admit. But yeah, it's basically the story of this this pair of war photographers.
You got a photographer played by Kirsten Dunst and a reporter played by Wagner Moura, who get some colleagues tag along, and essentially it's a road trip from I can't remember where they start, but they're heading to DC.
New York.
Oh, they're in New York, aren't they?
It's New York to DC, yeah. And it follows your standard traveling dystopian future genre of travel a bit, random encounter A, travel a bit, terrible encounter B, travel a bit. And it works. It's a tried and tested method. There are some interesting choices for locales and events that happen, which we will discuss in great length, I assume.
Maybe we won't say anything at all. Stay tuned to find out.
Maybe we're done. But yeah, it's them wanting to get to DC to interview the president because it's basically the last story that hasn't been told in this event. And the events that happen as they get there. Obviously, like you say, they take on an older colleague of theirs who wants his last hurrah, and a new colleague who's trying to break into the business, and it creates an interesting team dynamic.
Yeah, Kaylee Spenny, who I'm probably butchering horrendously, is an aspiring young photographer, and Stephen McKinley Henderson plays the much older veteran, probably way past retirement, veteran journalist Sammy. So that's your foursome for the movie. I didn't really know what to expect going into this film because I like to go in as blind as possible, which is really hard. Quite often, especially for the big films where they just bombard you with advertisements before every other film. But this one, I hadn't really seen too many adverts for, so I went in relatively blind. I didn't really expect it to be a big road trip movie, which keeps you almost as far away from the main action as possible. It's essentially it's a road trip movie for a war-torn country. It shows you the darker side of what people can and will become when their back's against the wall or they get a sniff of power. There's a couple of yokels who they've got guns and they'll beat people up. Essentially, they've got the monopoly on a gas station, say. So yeah, I wasn't really expecting it. Now, I did like the film. I very much enjoyed the film. It's just not what I was expecting.
If I could interject slightly. The trailers made it seem like this more sort of action epic, and then it's more like a social commentary of what the world would be if there was a civil war of this magnitude. Obviously, it works really well in the States because access to guns and militia forces is significantly easier than it is in a lot of other places in the world.
Yeah, but this wouldn't work in the UK because we'd basically all have our kitchen knives, and then that would be that.
Yeah, but it worked really, really well. And like I say, I think, and I kind of want to mention this actually. I watched when we did the review on The First Omen. I wanted to talk about this idea of tension and dread, and this is after I'd seen Civil War, which has tension all the way through to ridiculous levels. And I was like, well, the other film's terrible in comparison. So, hopefully you've seen the other video. If not, we'll link it or something. Maybe I don't know. Maybe we'll
link in the description, or maybe up there. Is it that? Yeah, in that angle.
In one of these directions, I see.
Angles. Now I have to put that in. Now I have to put that in. You've created work for me.
You could just put it in a comment below.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Thanks. Oh dear. Yeah. Tell me more of your thoughts. I want to see what you think. I feel like you have a lot to say.
I do. But before anything else, I kind of mentioned I wanted to talk about the recording studio first. So we obviously are seeing quite a few fantastic films and more A24 films than we would expect. We obviously reviewed Iron Claw. We're probably going to do Love's Lies Bleeding. I really enjoyed Talk to Me, the horror film from last year, and they're doing a second one coming out soon. A24, I don't think got a lot of attention before this, but during the actors' strike, they kind of agreed to terms straight away, which is why they've got more films coming out than others did. Like you mentioned earlier, their timeline hasn't been disrupted by this. I think it's just a great respect for the actors, like the work that they do, and just saying, look, fair enough, we want to make great films, we need you to be in it, let's keep making movies together. It's brilliant. It's nice to see them making some outstanding films with giant actors this year, which is really, really nice. Yeah,
basically what we were saying off recording is because all the other films had to production services had to shut down because they were refusing to negotiate for so long. A24 have kind of got this opportunity because they were making films to put things out into a slightly less populated cinema scape, and probably reaping the benefits slightly more, because some of these films are good, but they can get easily destroyed by Mario if there's one coming out and things like that. So yeah, no, it's nice to see. Also, don't try and mug off people in general, like the actors' strikes. Come on, treat people with respect. Give them what they owe. You're making millions and billions off the backs of these people, not just the big stars, but everybody else. I was like, come on, lads, share it out a bit. So, yeah.
But no, as you mentioned, obviously, I do have a lot of thoughts about this, and there are some themes through this that I really liked. I liked that everything is relatively obscure. So obviously, during the film, we are following reporters and forces from the Western Front, and it's heavily implied that they're probably on the right side of this. Obviously, you've got this dictatorship of a government and so on, but it never actually specifically says how the war started or what it's based on and who is right, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
Like the political leanings aren't a part of the film; it's just the story that matters.
Absolutely. You glean so little information on how or why the war, the Civil War started. Get a few snippets here or there. It's intentionally kept super vague. At times, that annoyed me a little bit. I will be honest. I'm not, give me the juicy gossip. And also, it's hard to know exactly what you're witnessing. You're witnessing this country fighting itself for a reason. I personally want to know slightly more, perhaps, about why, rather than just it's happening. So a bonus and a negative in the same sandwich, I would say.
No, I definitely agree. I think it would be very interesting to know the background. And obviously, it's nicer to follow a story when you know who's the good guy and who's not. But not knowing that does mean you kind of figuring out as you go in every interaction you go into. You don't know, well, are these pure bad guys, pure good guys, or is it somewhere in between? Because we don't know what the main conflict is. And there is a whole section which we'll talk through where people just try and ignore the fact that the war is happening because no one wants war. And obviously, if you don't know, then it makes sense that you try and stay out of it.
Yeah. So the main, you mentioned this already, but the main force fighting the government are the Western forces. There's of Texas and California. There's brief mentions of the fact that there were other regional rebellions, I guess you could call them, factions that have kind of been around or beaten already. But so the film really is about the camaraderie of people, specifically in this case the journalists and the reporters, who are in a terrible situation trying to highlight what's going on, and then but at the same time then how they continue to be people, and they go back to a hotel near the start of the film and they get drunk and they have a laugh. And they're always trying to outdo on each other and get the scoop as times are now. We're out of war and things like that. I did find during the film because you said very confidently that they're definitely following the Western forces. Unless I completely fell asleep for a second, I found a lot of the film is I wasn't entirely sure who they were with at certain times.
No, I agree. So I do think that there are points where they're with both sides. As I mentioned, I'm ill. But I think that the storyline is following the Western forces, Western Front, whatever, and having them as the morally correct side of this. Obviously, they do run into other sides of it, and they got to play the part, otherwise die, as I think a lot of war reporting does. You kind of have to do what needs to be done and say what needs to be said to get the story, but also not get murdered, which comes across very, very well in this. Again, like I say, the tension is
there's a few
palpable.
tense scenes where they meet certain people along the way. I don't necessarily know if you get to the end of the film. I don't necessarily know if I agree with you that you get to the end of the film and the Western forces are 100% on the side of right. And the moral, the moral choice, like you say there, because you know so little about why this happened, and there are scenes towards the end which I won't spoil too much where there's. We'll get into it later.
Yes. No, I'm fully inclined to agree with you there. Like the point is you don't know. The way it's being spun makes it seem like the Western forces are right, but it's very rare that a minority section, obviously 2 states out of 50. Are usually in the right, but it does come across that Nick Offerman's character as the president is this very much sort of, I can't say the word right, dictatorial, whatever the word is. I know dictator's right.
Authoritarian, I read a word.
Authoritarian, sure.
When I was checking the old Wikipedia for some notes earlier. But again, I don't think that necessarily fully came across. That
true.
The White House is this big authoritarian monster that's causing all these problems, and these are righteous separatists.
And-
I feel,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't, like I said at the start of this kind of little bit topic, is it's good that it's kind of super vague in a way, and it's also kind of bad. But you got your
I think the film does a really good job of showing the good and bad of both sides. 'Cause obviously, there's a section where they're following one of the small militia groups of the Western forces, and they kind of capture a couple of the main army. And I was watching this thinking, like, where the hell has the Geneva Convention gone in this? Like, there is a lot of questionable acts that go
out the
on.
window, dude.
Yeah, 100%. No one cares, and I understand war is difficult. War is war. But yeah, like if people have surrendered, maybe try and abide by that. Like,
Yeah, which we can't. Yeah, exactly. It's like, so you're saying the one side has got the moral high ground, and then what you're witnessing, you're like, oh, well, maybe maybe they don't actually. So yeah, there's a scene. Without going into too much detail, they're pinned down by a sniper, and they end up next to some military personnel, and they even have a conversation about trying to like figure out which side these military guys on who are fighting the sniper who's shooting at the journalists. They never really get an answer. It's basically, it doesn't matter right now. You're getting shot at.
can I tack onto that?
Yeah.
So obviously, it's not much of a spoiler, but obviously that scene happens, and it's the scene with the Christmas Wonderland section built. You know that wasn't a set built for this, like at all.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. So there was some company that built this Christmas Wonderland, very similar to the Willy Wonka thing issue in Glasgow, where they tried to make this event and it didn't work, and they kind of bailed, and things were left there, and they were like, "Cool, that looks great. We're going to use that." And generally, that's what it is. It's just left there, and it looks a bit rotten and dilapidated because it's been there for a while.
Well, yeah, because it totally looks like somebody has set that up to cause intimidation and to throw people off their, their normal game, as it were, I suppose, and freak people out a bit and then shoot them. Essentially.
Well, the director Alex Garland has been quoted on this saying that like he liked it being in there. The idea is if you haven't put away your Christmas decorations, clearly something isn't right. And that's a direct quote from him, by the way, which I really like.
I think that works. Actually, it makes you uncomfortable. It does make you uncomfortable.
It does.
The second you see them, you're like, hang on a minute. It's like June. They're like because they're like sleeping outside, and so it's warm enough. Put it that way. The thing I quite like about this film, or don't like, in a way, is just how it's not completely unfathomable. As a concept to see this happen in the near future. Particularly in America, because I think it's fair to say, regardless of which side of the political divide you stand on, tensions be going up globally.
Yes.
So that you can watch this going, not necessarily this exact scenario of Texas and California versus the government or something, but just some ruckus kicking off a little.
Ooh. This is one of the things I really liked about it, because every time you see something like this, it's always somewhere distant, somewhere far away. And obviously things with the Russian-Ukraine situation in real life brought things a little bit closer to home. But seeing this in the US, it means like now it's right on your doorstep. This is like a global superpower, like first world country, and now this is happening. And yeah, it is in itself the topic is uncomfortable and tense. And then the other actions that fall into the story do a great job of spurring that further. Yeah,
and it I can tell you it affected my psyche slightly, because I had some weird dreams last night about being in a war zone and things like that, and what I would do in a civil war-y I mean, my dreams had some nuclear war in it, which this film doesn't go as far to involve, but yeah, so it wiggled its way in there like a little brain wormy, gnawing away, going, hello, bit of war for you. Now, you made a really good point there about it being brought so much closer to home, with it being in America, in a first world kind of situation. Because I have been thinking throughout the day that did the fact this was in America really add anything further to the plot? What I mean is, based on how little information you kind of got about how and why the Civil War has started. Could this have been set anywhere on the planet, in the Middle East, for example? And it's just a couple of American reporters / photographers trying to get from A to B, similar threatening militia circumstances. And I think, yes, it could have been. I think it, like, flat out.
Oh, understand.
Did the fact that it was, a civil war in America, would that add to the marketing and the interest in the film? Absolutely. And so I was a bit like, it's kind of just like whatever about it. But you actually made a really good point, I reckon, which is, seeing a scenario so close to ours in a way. I mean, the UK and America are wildly different. Gun control, for one thing.
Yeah.
So,
which makes a big difference.
In a situation where everything's broken down, people have access to guns. They can do their own thing, which is what you see in the film. In here, it wouldn't happen, but it's far closer than just being somewhere in the Middle East, in Iraq, for example. Seeing that, so I had that as a kind of a negative in my head that I was going to kind of comment on, but you've swung me around, so kudos.
I think it works with some of the areas that they go to. Obviously, you've got the big sort of New York City. Everything is relatively like there's bombs and stuff going off, which you see in the opening scene, so no spoilers. But it's still like the hotel's running. Yes, there's no power. She has to walk up 10 flights of stairs, but yeah, it's
good
still
exercise.
A running city. Yeah, exactly. Then you get to other towns where things are a little bit more dilapidated, and there's bodies in the streets and hanging from car washes. And then you get to another little town where everything's normal and people are trying to forget it, but there's still soldiers on the rooftops and in the streets.
There's that element.
It's just things are normal, but they're not normal, and then suddenly they're not normal at all, and it really messes you. Like, again, it sounds really, really bad, but you mentioned obviously like issues with Iraq in the past, and you just are so used to media showing destroyed towns and cities and stuff, and that's what you expect. But in the early days of a civil war, well, it's not going to be, and it's weird to not trust your neighbors, not know your neighbors, and that element is really, really tense. Like, I can't keep saying the word tense enough. It was tense.
Yeah, people do turn on people when backs are against the wall, and you see that in this film.
Which I'm sure we'll cover the specific scene everyone knows in the spoilers.
I imagine so. I haven't written this down as a note, but it's kind of just popped back into my head. I know this probably happens in other films, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. But I really enjoyed some of the action scenes of, them going around with the soldiers and being protected by the soldiers. So they're being like moved around and taking the picture, being pulled back. The reporter, Joel is the character's name, like pulling the photographers back. So like, go out, take your big picture, but then I'm yanking you back so you don't get, shot at. And things like that. I thought that was really dynamic and really well shot, and showed you like the chaos in getting these reports and these photos and the film. There's a film crew who pop up a couple of times, and you can see them trying to get these shots, trying to do like direct to camera stuff while just like artillery is going around. So I thought that was pretty good.
Whilst you're talking about sort of the artillery side of it, there was a choice made that they didn't use sort of like half blank or quarter blank rounds. They used full blank rounds that gave the exact sound and feel as if artillery shots were going off and guns were going off. Like, it wasn't muted at all, to make the actors feel as if they were there, which I think was a great stylistic choice.
Well, there you go. I didn't know that either. Right. I'm aware that we're already at 24 minutes and we'd like to hit...
really?
No, we don't want to go too far over 30 for this podcast. Okay. That's kind of the aim. So I think it's time to move into spoilers.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm going to give it a thumbs up from me.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay. I'll kick us off with the spoilers, because essentially... everything we've just talked about. Essentially, I mentioned it being a road trip story, but essentially this is the story of a young amateur wannabe war photographer getting all of her colleagues killed.
No, exactly. And the thing is, it's even referenced early on with Kirsten Dunst's character.
Just, yeah. What's the character's name? Jessie Cullen is a young aspiring war photographer, and she just, honestly, her actions just get everybody killed. She's the worst. The worst. She foolishly towards the end, when they're storming the White House, she dives into the middle of a corridor where the Western Front are firing down one end, the Secret Services, I assume, are firing down the others. She dives out to take this shot, just stands bang in the middle. And Kirsten Dunst's character, whose name is Lee Smith, has to dive out and like push her to the ground, and she ends up getting shot. And her actions result in Sammy getting killed earlier in the film when she's messing about, jumping between cars like a fool. And then they get in a very tense situation with Jesse Plemons.
Can I jump in a little bit?
No. Yeah, of course you can.
So obviously with the Lee Smith, Kirsten Dunst character being killed, at the beginning of the film, she mentions that, like, would you take the shot if I was being killed to get the publicity? And then later in the film, obviously, Jesse's character does take the shot of Lee Smith being killed, and it's a whole sort of full circle thing. Because even Lee Smith talks about the fact that she only became famous because of the Antifa massacre, which even in that, we don't know if the Antifa people massacred someone or they were being massacred. Again, all this obscurity. And obviously with the Sammy death, it was very much I don't like the fact that he was like, we're not going in, this is bad, we're all gonna die if we do this. And then I'm like, okay, we're going in. I swore, sorry. We're going in. I know you've done it before. We're going in, and out of everyone, he's the only person who gets, not the only person out of the main four that dies because of it. Like, he didn't want to go in, and he paid the price because Jesse messed around and led to a bad situation. Now, obviously, I'm assuming you have some comments on the Jesse Plemons scene, which is the one we're talking about, that is the result of Sammy's death. So you go first.
It's probably one of the tensest scenes in the film, in which he is a big racist and shoots several people for not being American enough for his liking.
Well, the exact line is, what type of American are you? Like, it fits very nicely. It doesn't matter that you're American. What type of American are you?
Yeah, and this is one of the main scenes where I was like, I don't know which side you're on. And I like, they played it well enough that he could have just been a bad military personnel. I mean, he's wearing very funky glasses, so is he even on duty at this point? He's got a mass grave. Which one of the characters? Well, it's the young girl. She falls. I don't know. I'm doing spoiler free in my spoilers. She falls in, which is gross, by the way.
Yeah,
horrendous. And he wants to know what type of American you are, and it's a tense one, man. It's a tense one.
Right. He shoots Tony just because he's from Hong Kong, even though obviously he's an American citizen or whatever. So it very much falls into, like, it doesn't really matter what side you're on. Are you American enough for his arbitrary rules?
I feel like if Tony had said anywhere else, he would have probably been fine. Because he was quite happy with all the other answers if he'd have just said.
Well, this is what makes me think he's on the government side of it, because obviously they mentioned all places that weren't California or Texas.
Yeah.
But we honestly don't know. Again, I want to go into a little bit of trivia with Jesse Plemons. Obviously, he wasn't supposed to be in the film. The original actor pulled out 4 days beforehand, and Kirsten Dunst went, "Oh, by the way, my husband acts. He'd probably be good for this," and he got the role. And
are they married?
Job. Yes. What? Did you do any research into this film?
I don't know research into personal lives. I had no idea about that. Wow. Oh, there you bloody go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good scene. I actually think the earlier scene, I said it was the most tense scene, but actually I think the gas station scene,
it's up there,
is worse. It's like kind of the first introduction to the dodginess of what America has become. And there's some they're referred to as looters by the guys operating the gas station. But who knows what they really did.
But
they just hung up and beaten up a lot.
It shows how much the world has sort of devolved, because he's like, so the guy who's showing Jesse's character, the guys that are hung up in the car wash, he goes, I went to school with this guy. Should we kill him now or beat him up a few days, let him starve, and then kill him in a few days? Like, that's someone you knew from school. Like, that's ridiculous. But obviously it's a world that we don't know, and hopefully we'll never know.
Absolutely. We kind of mentioned this at the start. Moving on, there's simply not enough Nick Offerman in this film. He is essentially in the opening scene and the final scene.
Yeah.
You see him practicing a speech to give to the nation, and he's trying to get the right cadence in his pronunciations and things like that. which I actually really enjoyed that scene.
It was good.
Because of course they do that. It's a performance, isn't it? And then he's heard on the radio a few times giving updates and things and like speeches. And then at the very end, once they've murdered most people in the White House who are left inside, including some people trying to negotiate, he gets shot begging for his life, essentially. Which is, again, why you're like, are the Western Front the good? What are they? The Western forces?
Yes.
How good are the guys here? Because they just a lot of people they just straight up murder in that final assault.
Yes, no, I get that completely. There's some questionable choices, and it tends to be the smaller sides, the militia sides do more questionable acts. It's very much everyone's a freedom fighter from the side they look at. Like, no one's a terrorist unless you're the other side. The way that Nick Offerman begs for his life in the end, it very much falls into something that Sammy says at the beginning, that your Gaddafi characters and whatever, they will always let you down at the end. Like, they talk a big game, they're always this strong military force, and at the end they will always cry and beg.
Yeah.
And he does it. I wish there was a better, like, even a couple of questions asked, but it's very much, please don't kill me, or please don't let them do this, and then dead.
Yeah. So essentially in the film, you're led to, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but you're kind of led to believe by the news reports you listen to on the radio that the Western forces aren't doing as well as, and then some things happen. Sammy gets killed, and then suddenly it's like, yeah, the government have surrendered. Everyone but the president, and we're going to DC, and there's a big shootout of who's left, and they absolutely storm the White House and just a bit of a massacre. But again, going back to I'm not entirely sure who is the good guys, and I think it's purposely painted that there's not necessarily the good guys. There's just two opposing ideologies and darkness on both sides and things of that nature. But I'm watching it going, am I supposed to be pleased that the president's just been killed after watching like the previous like killings essentially of civilians, more or less? So yeah, I just, it keeps you on the edge, doesn't it? Basically, is what I'm saying. Is you're never entirely sure. And like I said at the very start of this, I can't tell if I think that's a good thing or a bad thing, that it doesn't reveal enough to me to have chosen a side fully. Or maybe that's a great thing. Do you want to? We're going a bit long already, so if you've got anything else to add, now is definitely the time to crack on.
Yeah, just some stylistic choice stuff I want to discuss, then I'm happy to close up. Like, obviously the cameras that they use, Jessie has this old Nikon that she mentioned she got from her dad, and it's a winding film camera. It's interesting, and to be fair, a lot of the shots she gets in the black and white, because they do stills of the shots, they're really, really nice. Kirsten Dunst's character, who's this like battle-hardened veteran of this media, she's using a Alpha 7R Mark V, I believe. Shut up. Look, they covered the Sony branding, but it still has the Alpha logo, and you know what it is. I could go a lot more into the Sony side of this, but I'm not going to because we're way over time. But I also think that some of the shots she got weren't great, and I was confused about that all the way through. But then you kind of see at the end where she's disenfranchised with the job role, and she kind of falls apart nearing the end. And that makes a lot more sense. So I don't know if that was actually a choice or just something they kind of goofed into, but I really liked it from my side of it. Some of the recording choices, I know they were using a top-end camera. It was the Venice, I think Venice Mark II, for the actual filming. But they add in a lot of sort of chromatic aberration, where you get this sort of like dual cone layering around the ends of things. It was interesting. It made it look like it was a lower production than it was, but that also kind of fit with the story, which I really, really liked. And then the scene where they're driving through the burning forest.
Oh, yeah. Out of nowhere. Beautiful.
Yeah. Visually, absolutely beautiful. Music choice, a bit questionable.
The music, I think you'll either love the music choices in this film or you'll hate them. There's some that are intentionally chosen to give you that edge, where I can't remember what the term is, which infuriates me. But basically, they never get to the point where there's like a nice release. It kind of just keeps going. And then it never goes into like a major chord or anything like that to like just go, it's just like minutes on end of the same like thing. So yeah, I mean, it does its job, but you might not like it.
100%.
At the same time.
I think it's time to wrap up.
I think it's time to wrap up, but I've got one more point. I've just remembered, while being pushed over to get her life saved, the young photographer takes some incredibly quick action photos of Kirsten Dunst being shot to pieces. And I was like, wow, reactions. And it's like, it just popped into my head. So, yeah, there you go. That's my final thoughts. Real quick at pictures. Yeah. Anyway, wrap us up.
Yeah, I think we haven't covered anywhere near as much as we can or we should. I would recommend everyone watch this film. It's brilliant no matter what side you fall down on. So please watch it, and hopefully we covered enough to keep you happy. But thank you so much for watching and listening. You can find us on YouTube and Spotify. YouTube if you want to see our lovely faces, or at least his lovely face. You can find Bobby on Twitch as Bobby Android. You might start seeing me more on Twitch as McBeardy if I can get my act together and fix a few things. But until either the next episode or until you see us there, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you very much. See you later. Bye. Great outro. The best outro.
Thank you.
This is the secret outro. Good work.